Welcome to another conversation with SYD Life. I'm Mark Summers, and today I'm joined by Geoff Cooper. And Geoff is a business owner. He's a real estate entrepreneur, and he's worked very hard at building his own investment portfolio over the years. Geoff, thank you so much for your time. We're going to have a conversation about real estate today and how we get started. So can you just tell us where we take our first step?
It's a big question, isn't it? Because I remember when I first bought my first house and it was overwhelming and it was like, whoa. Yeah, and I had lots of trouble getting a loan. This is back in 1980. Yeah, I mean, things were very different then, but it was all hard, all difficult and scary, and I think that's pretty common. When you're getting into the marketplace, you've never done it before, and real estate is very attractive because you've got this thing called leverage. You can use $100,000 or maybe $200,000 to buy $1 million property, and you can't get that elsewhere as easily. And so that leverage works for you very, very well when prices are going up. But if prices are going down, it works against you. And people at the moment are feeling the pinch, because prices are coming down. So where do you start with real estate? I think the best place to start is asking yourself, what do I want and why am I getting into the marketplace? Am I buying a home? Is this an investment? Is it a stepping stone to eventually owning a home? And to really get a blank sheet of paper, and blank sheets of paper mock you because you've got to write down your goals and you've got to write down your plans and you've got to come up with a plan to buy a home, and the blank sheet of paper laughs at you and it mocks you, and you think, oh no. But just start by writing down, all of the basic stuff, like what do you want to buy? If it's in Sydney, it's probably going to be a unit for younger people, rather than a house, and buying a unit as a stepping stone to one day getting a house, but to become financially literate and to be very, very aware of your own financial position, so that you become very crystal clear about what it's going to take to get a loan to buy a unit or a house. And I mean, it may be that you're looking at starting off investing, which is great as well. But so I think write down a bit of a plan and say, that my goal is to save $1,000 a week for 3 years, and to also do some other clever entrepreneurial activity to end up with $200,000 as a deposit. And that's going to let me buy a property for $1 million. Then once you've got that shaped up, you can then go and talk to your accountant and say, look, is this realistic? And then you can go and talk to understand the tax implications as well, if you're getting into investment in particular. But to be very, very crystal clear about the shape of your own finances, and then you can go looking at property and saying, hang on, what can I buy for this $1 million? Obviously you come up with your own numbers, and then I'd suggest to you that it's really important to have a good look at what the blockages are. What's stopping me getting a deposit?
So and on that piece of paper, on that blank piece of paper, you're writing your goal, but you're also writing your expense of what you have now and what it's going to take as well.
You're looking at how can I get a deposit? I mean, really, that's the main thing, because you do need to have a deposit, and you're then, keeping it fairly focused and simple. You then get the rubber out, because you're written in pencil, hopefully, and then you start researching. Then you start going and talking to lots of different people. You can talk to family, you can talk to friends, you can, and then you can go and have a chat to your bank and say, look, this is my plan for the future. I plan to have this much money in 3 years' time or 2 years' time or 1 year's time. Is this realistic? Am I going to be able to borrow this amount of money to buy this property? And then maybe it's good to talk to several different banks. And brokers are very, very good for this too, because they're going to have access to a whole range of different banks, and they'll also understand the different options. So because we all think that it's a really kind of like linear process that okay, there's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, but in reality, there's so many different factors that come into you being able to get a loan and what kind of loan. And so by educating yourself and being really clear about what's possible, that's really the starting point.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It is, and that's a great point. I think the key point in all of that is the deposit and getting the deposit, because you can't go to a mortgage broker or to a bank or to anywhere without a deposit, and you definitely can't start looking until you do. When Tammy and I started looking for a place in 2016, we were presented with 5 options of how you can do it. I guess I'm just saying this so it's not daunting to people out there, but your deposit doesn't have to come directly from you. Sometimes you might be in a beneficial place where your parents have kept money aside for you. These kind of conversations as well. There's obviously lender's mortgage insurance. So if you're, say, only got 15% of that deposit, there's an option there as well.
Yeah.
But there's so many different conversations to be had to be able to get that 20% deposit, before you start looking. So it's good to do your research.
Yeah, and look, that's a very good point, because depending on what's happening in the economy, there were some stages where you needed no deposit.
Yeah, that's right.
Where banks would lend you on a low doc loan, as it was called,
yep.
and you didn't need any deposit. But things have changed.
Yep.
Banks are more conservative now. It's harder to get loans.
Yep.
But you make a really good point. I mean, go and talk to mum and dad, go and talk to grandpa and grandma, and talk to friends, and you may find that there are people willing to lend you money
or be a guarantor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, if all those options aren't there, then I think it's a really cool thing to be able to talk to all your friends and say, hey, we want to buy a home. We know you guys do as well. How about we all support each other in a process, maybe for a season of time. Let's all start to think about how we can minimise our spending and maximise our saving.
Yep.
Let's all start eating at each other's homes instead of going to fancy restaurants.
Yep.
Let's
have barbecues instead of takeaway nights.
And if you're actually creating a slightly different culture amongst your friends, so that everyone's on board and supporting each other.
Yes.
And some people will opt out of that, and that's okay.
Yep.
But it's very, very useful, because then you start getting innovative ideas. That your friend is making some money buying and selling stuff on eBay, and he's making an extra $10,000 a year.
Yep.
Wow, maybe I could do that.
Yeah.
Someone's selling all the stuff in their parents' garage, all the rubbish. Someone's working out some clever ways to generate extra income, and that can rapidly progress you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great advice, Geoff. Yeah, because there is so many options to actually get the ball rolling, and this that is just such a good piece of a good nugget of wisdom.
And it gives energy.
It gives energy.
Yeah,
it creates bonds and friendships as well. Like you're going through it together. The other option, I guess, as well, and we were talking earlier in the lead up to this, is also looking outside of Sydney. So if you're not going to buy property in Sydney, is looking outside. Now I've had friends that have done that recently, and they've benefited from it, and they've got a weekly income, and it's also paying off their mortgage. But so what is the other options in terms of that? And where do you start looking when it comes to, because there's some great places to buy, like Brisbane a few years ago was starting to be one of those great places to buy, maybe a little bit further up, Western Australia. There's so many different places to get going. Where's...
Yeah, look, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
Because if you can't afford to buy now in Sydney, then I think it's a very good option to buy an investment property outside of Sydney.
Yep.
And the big thing about investment properties are that in Sydney, you'll find that the yield on properties, and the yield basically is how much income you receive from an investment property. So if you've got a place worth $1 million and you're getting $50,000 net return, then that's a 5% yield.
Yep.
Realistically, in Sydney, the yields are quite low.
Yeah.
Because it's what's called a growth market.
Yep.
So Sydney is focused on capital growth. So when people buy properties, they're expecting over time significant capital growth,
Yep.
and therefore the yield is lower. In the country, historically, the capital growth hasn't been as high, and but the yields have been much higher.
Yeah, sure.
So it's quite common to be able to get a 5% yield
Yep.
in the country, which means that you can buy a property and the rent will pay for all of your interests, which means that it's not becoming a burden on you, and then you're relying upon over time achieving a capital growth. And that's a very, very good way to do it. And then where do you find these properties?
Yeah.
Well, me personally, I haven't had the time
Yep.
to look, and I've used buyer's agents.
Yep. That's a good option as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and buyer's agents are the opposite to your typical real estate agent who sells a property. Buyer's agents find you a property to buy.
Yep.
And I've got a relationship with 2 or 3 agents who I've known for years and years and years, and they know me well enough now to be able to ring me up and go, look, there's a really good property in Upper Coomera. We think it would fit your profile. Yep. And often I haven't got the money to take advantage, but that's okay. Yep. So again, if you've done your homework and you know how much you can borrow, then you can go to a buyer's agent and you can say, look, this is how much money I can borrow $400,000 and I've got 50
Yep.
or 100, or maybe it's less.
Yep.
What can I do?
Yeah, sure.
And then so you're relying upon other people to help you.
Yep.
One big difference between when I first started back in early 80s in the market is that the internet is just so rich with information. We didn't have access to that all those years ago. And so obviously there are many, many newsletters. There are many, many different commentators. Yep. Good just to start to read and to learn about stuff.
Sure.
But most importantly, when you're looking to buy a property in the country, you really have to be very, very clear about the fact that you want it to be a growth market. And that means, that there's good facilities, there's growing population, there's employment, there are schools, there are facilities, good facilities, there are plans for growth.
Yep.
And some examples of that more recently have been in the Central West, Orange.
Yeah.
Where I'm from originally.
Yeah, you're from out there.
And that's probably doubled in price in the last 6 or 7 years. So that may have had its run.
Yeah.
So it could be smarter to look at the next areas.
Yep.
I mean, certainly Northern Queensland is looking pretty good at the moment.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, especially like the tropic. Yeah, the top end.
Yeah.
A lot of people are moving up there. Yeah.
And also West Australia. I mean, it's recovering really quickly from being
shut down and
quite flat. And you might say, well, hang on a minute, why would I buy a property in Queensland when I can't even see it? Well, you find a really good agent to look after it for you, and we've found a tremendous agent to look after a place of ours up in Queensland.
Yeah, well,
really, really good guy. We talk to him all the time, and we trust him. And how do you find those people?
Yep.
Yeah, talk to lots and lots of other people and get recommendations.
Yep.
Talk to me, talk to you, talk to. Asking questions, I think, is real key.
Yeah.
Often we feel a little bit, I guess, inadequate, and we think, but I look like an idiot.
There's also the part as well of like, and I think it can be a generational thing. But there's also the part of the money side of it as well, of how much you earn and how much you don't, and your friends earn, and and you're comparing yourself to what other people have and what they don't have.
Exactly.
That can play a little bit of a part of, and just taking that hurdle and say, hey, look, I want to do this. Do you want to do this? Like breaking down the stigma and just having those difficult conversations can go a long way.
That's a really good point. I love what you said then, because it's, one of the most successful property people that I had come across over the years, and not that I'm focused on just property. I mean, I'm a recruiter primarily, but was a fireman who didn't earn a lot of money.
Yep.
But he just started. And the thing about real estate, it's a long game.
Yep.
Because you're using the miracle of compound interest.
That's why the banks lock you in for 30 years.
Well, they benefit from
they do benefit from it.
Yeah, which is why you want to pay it off as quickly as you can.
That's exactly right.
But, but the miracle of compound interest, your property is increasing in value. Now, sure, there may be times when it dips, as we're seeing at the moment. Yep. But it's a long game.
Yep.
You should look at buying a property as a long-term investment.
Yeah.
Because, yes, sure, there will be dips, but over the long term, you'll see consistent increase.
Yeah, and there's a few things to consider as well. Even when we bought and sold, we sold at the peak of the market, bought in probably just as the market was still at there as well. But the things that we considered as well, and just an idea for people, if you've got small kids, it was schools, childcare, shops, public transport. These are all things to consider. Just on you got your deposit, you're having a look as well, just with the mortgage brokers and going to the banks. We were just talking off air before about the difference. I've had a great experience with a mortgage broker, and your daughter and your son-in-law, had a great experience with a bank. Is it just about finding the right people that you connect with in that process?
I think that's a really big part of it. And I mean, I think the value of going to your own bank, if you've been with them for a long time, they've got a record of your history, and so they can see if you've been a regular saver or if you've been managing your finances well. Yep. That sort of de-risks you as a client. Yep. But I think what you said is really important. Having that feeling like you've got a connection.
Yeah. I
know my daughter and son-in-law just felt an instant connection.
Yep.
With this chap. He was just so helpful and very quick. Yep. But if that doesn't occur, I think mortgage brokers have access to a range of different banks. You've got to be a little bit careful because, I mean, some mortgage brokers are locked into just working with maybe 2 banks or 3 banks. Yep. And is that the best option for you?
Yeah.
Because different banks have different attitudes to lending. Some banks, and I've never worked out why, but some banks are happy to lend you a construction loan. You might want to buy some land and build a house. Some are more into that than others. Some are less willing to lend on a property that needs renovation.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be the next question, because you've got your deposit, you've gone to the bank, you've gone to the mortgage broker, you found that connection. Obviously, there's steps now that the banks and the mortgage brokers will ask you to do. They'll ask you to get your pay slips together. They'll ask you to get your funds together, show your spending and everything, like you mentioned. When you've got everything in order and you've got the pre-approval, because there's a step, there's like getting the finance and the pre-approval and having your 10% deposit ready so you can actually lay down a deposit on a property you like. You've got to find the property, and when you go to these properties, there's some hidden. The way I put it is, you inherit what you buy, and sometimes you don't know what you inherit if you don't have the right people around you to help you.
Yeah.
So, what's the next kind of step? Taking your father a builder. What would you do? What did you do for your kids when they were looking?
Yeah. Look, I mean, we all went as a bit of a groupie, show to the openings, and we would all.
It intimidates real estate agents. I'd like not to say no, not true.
And I think we're all trying to impress each other with the most clever question. You know? Oh, why is that gutter hanging off up there? No. Look, I think if you don't really have knowledge about building construction, which most of us don't, you rely upon professionals. And so, I think if it's a unit, very important to actually get hold of the strata minutes and to read through and to look at how much money is available for the sinking fund, and so on, and how much big works have been done, how much works have they got planned to do, what are they, and when you always get a pest and building inspection done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sometimes with units that's already been done and you can access it.
Yep.
Through something else, but also, take friends with you. You know, take someone who's in the building game.
Yep.
And just ask them what they think about it.
Yeah. We did that on a couple of properties. We did that one at Mona Vale when we were looking at it, and God blimey, like I'm glad we did. Like Tammy was sold. My wife Tammy, she was sold. She wanted it. I was like, this is a catastrophe. This is a knockdown. And I brought these two guys with me, two really good guys, and at the end we had a conversation out the front, and we said, nah, this isn't it. This is just not going to be it. And we're glad we didn't, because there was a lot of work, and you're looking at, hundreds of thousands of dollars before you've even moved into a place. Yeah. So it's good to have the building and pest inspections done. It's good to have them done on the real estate agents will get them done through someone else. I've found in the past that it's kind of good to do your own, rather than, that might cost you an extra $200, but it's definitely worth having that done. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree, and I think what we're talking about before is really important too. I'm amazed at how few people come and say, "Oh, look, can I have a chat to you about getting in the market?" I mean, there have been 3 or 4 in the last few years that haven't. It's just been my pleasure and honour to kind of get behind them. And
that's why I pumped you up at the beginning. Yeah, you've got a good. It's nothing to be ashamed of. You guys, live at Bayview. You've got a good portfolio, but you've worked hard for it. And I think and honest conversations with yourself and other people, like I think that's the stigma that needs to be broken down, and it actually takes the fear out of buying as well. Yeah. When you talk to someone about the hard processes and the hard steps that you have to take, they might seem a little bit frantic, but you're passionate about it, Geoff. So I love it. I love the energy of it.
Oh, thank you. I mean, look, I pick people's brains all the time. I mean, like I'm active in the share market, and every broker I talk to, I go, "What would you be buying right now if you had this much money?" And wait until they respond. And I ask people in your world, if you wanted to get into the market here in Sydney, what would you buy with $1 million, or what would you buy with $800,000 or $600,000?
Yep.
Where would you start?
Yep.
Maybe Western Sydney, whatever. But there's so much knowledge right around us in our communities. Whether it's your church community, whether it's your sporting community, whether it's at work, pick people's brains, because it's such an honour. When people ask me, I think, oh, mate, I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah. We're coming to the end. There's a couple other things we just have to touch on. Finding a place, getting approved by the vendors is like, once you've got that place, 10% down. Conveyances is the next. People freak out when they go conveyancer. Like, just break that down a little bit for us so people aren't so intimidated.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything really to be worried about with that, because look, there are 2 basic categories.
Yep.
There are specialist conveyancers who generally are not solicitors.
Yep.
And that's all they do.
Yep.
And their fees I found to be pretty reasonable.
Yep.
I was looking back at one of the last ones we did in Queensland, and it was and her fee, wonderful. She's so efficient. Oh boy, she's onto everything so quickly.
Yeah.
Her fee was only $700 plus all the costs of all the searches and the cost that she had to bear. So the total cost was, I think, around $1,400.
Yeah, sure.
Solicitors will be more expensive.
Yeah.
And I think for more complex situations, maybe it's warranted. But I would recommend finding a local conveyancer. We train with a conveyancer who's done the work for our daughters, and she's just gold, and very reasonable pricing. So I mean, I don't think it cost any more than, I don't know, $1,200 to $1,500. Maybe it's gone up a bit, but a really good professional person, and particularly if they're in your world, there's a real sense of relationship. Yep. Which is important.
It's funny as well, you'll find a lot of the conveyancers, not all, but some, if you're actively looking and you're doing the work, we had one of our conveyances was fantastic. It just gave us the first couple, free.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, just you could tell that we were looking, and but then when we missed out on a couple, he said, "Hey guys, we're gonna have to charge next one." Thankfully, the next one was the one we bought, but yeah, it's just it's finding that as well. It's like the mortgage broker and the bank. It's just finding that relationship as well, the one that fits, easy, accessible. Going to ask you the questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Provide the right questions to ask, and you can deliver back.
It's almost like they're another person on your team.
Yeah, they are.
I know. I think of it as a team.
Yep.
And it's not my idea about having a team, but you've got a team of, you've got your accountant, and if you haven't got one, I suggest it's worth having an accountant because they can give you a perspective that you can't see.
Yeah.
And they know your whole situation, and they're going, "Oh, have you thought about the fact that you're going to be hit with capital gains tax if you sell that?" And you think, "Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
thank you."
Yeah, and that's what they're so great for. I think we won't go into this too much, but I think things to look out for while you're buying. We're going to have another conversation down the line about real estate here, but just from a buyer's perspective, I've found that you've got to remember that the real estate agents are on the seller's side.
Yeah.
What are some of the tricks that you've been caught out, or you've noticed over the years that could save you a few bucks?
Yeah. Look, I mean, from a really big picture point of view, I think you have to take any purchase very seriously because it's one big lump of investment. It's not like you're sort of putting, $5,000 into this share and $5,000 into that share and so on. You are committing a big chunk of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, as I said before, I think think of it as a long-term investment because to think of it as a short-term, if you think you can play the cycles and I can buy quickly and sell, maybe you can. And if you're a professional flipper, then great. But also I think don't. Be realistic about your own capabilities. If you think that you're going to renovate a house and you think you're going to do it on the cheap, that's probably not going to work.
Especially if you don't have the skills.
If you don't have the skills. Yeah. And, it may be that that's what you want to do and you're very committed and very focused to developing those skills, which is a different story.
Yeah, sure.
But I think, some of the worst investments I've made were we buying off the plan.
Yep.
I think be really careful.
Yeah, sure.
Especially on the back of units in Sydney where there's been major structural difficulties.
Yeah.
I think just be very careful. You need to make sure that it's being built by a very reputable builder and the developer's strong and everyone involved is,
on board.
On board. But a bad investment we made was we bought a property up on the Central Coast in Umina, and we we had so much difficulty finding and retaining tenants.
Yeah, sure.
It was just such a difficult time for us to, the tenant would be there for 2 months and then they weren't able to pay rent, and then we'd say, look, that's okay. See how you go. And then a month later, we still no rent, and then 2 months no rent, and 3 months no rent, and then what do you do? And I mean, I don't want to throw people out of houses. So I think just being a little bit savvy if you're buying an investment property about where you're buying it, and not taking too big a risk, and don't be enticed by really high yields. Because if there's a very high yield, say 8 or 9%, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that you won't see much capital growth, and also it may be a very high risk environment. For example, there was a big rush to buy houses in mining towns. But then the mine shuts down. Or something happens. The mine closes down because the price of the metal has dropped too low and it's not sustainable or whatever. But things can change. So I wouldn't go for very small niche towns. Make sure you stick to bigger places that have got pretty much guaranteed growth, because you're seeing people are moving into the area, new schools are being built, Westfields are excited about building something down the road.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think they're the main ones.
Just another one as well. Resources, shows, TV shows, podcasts that you've watched to help you in this area?
Yeah, look, I've read a lot of books. I think, I mean, I get newsletters popping into my inbox. I've forgotten his name now.
The
Michael
Barefoot Investor.
Well, actually, the Barefoot Investor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Barefoot Investor, very, very good to get you started.
Yep.
Scott Page, I think his name is.
Yep, Scott Page. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
that's right. Yep.
Yeah, actually, my daughters were really involved in that, and it's a really great way to structure saving. And
it's like you said at the beginning of the
budgeting.
Conversation with the blank piece of paper. Yeah, he actually gives you the steps for the goal setting and what's realistic on your wages and
yeah. I think most of the stuff that I've read has just been to get really financially literate.
Yep.
So that you really, actually, one thing I'll add is that I've learned over the years how powerful it is to track your finances on a monthly basis. And I mean, because the numbers don't lie.
Yep.
And it also spurs you on and think, I mean, I'm more motivated by making more money than by than spending less.
Yep.
Because spending less involves a fair bit of pain.
Yep.
But I think your mindset, and particularly if you're a believer, if you're a follower of Christ, then you should see yourself as an overcomer, and you should see yourself as someone who is blessed.
Yeah, sure.
We live out of a blessed life. Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say there is I like to read books on how to increase my income, how to find new ways of generating income. But I can't think of any other books off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, that's awesome. I always think good stories, bad stories. Selling Houses Australia on Foxtel.
Love that.
Just a beautiful.
Exactly.
It gives a really great understanding. You spoke about a mining. I think the first episode of this season was about a couple who realised they were going to take a hit because they worked in a mining company up in just past outside of Ipswich, and it went broke, and the town's just gone to a heap, and they just a great story of bad investment, and it got out, still made ends meet and didn't get out too badly, but still a loss. And I think that's the thing to realise as well. You're going to have your wins and your losses. Mark Burris said just before one of the last rate hikes that that he lost his first home in the 90s just because of the 17-18% interest rates, and they had to sell and move out, and and had to start the whole process again. There's no shame in that. You've actually taken a big step to actually buy a house in the first place, and you don't have to be scared of having another crack if something doesn't go right. But
I can put my hand up there. We bought a terrible investment. It's still the bane of our life. It's probably cost us. I won't say how much. It's probably $800,000 or something. It's been horrible. It's just been sucking the life out of us. But anyway, that can happen. But do your very best to avoid that.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I think we've covered everything off, Geoff. I've learned a heap off you in this conversation, especially about capital growth and all that as well. Just knowing the different areas and how to build your investment portfolio as well. I think all the stuff in there is key to building, like you said, your investment portfolio, of making sure that you're finding the right real estate agent, you're finding the right agents to deal with your properties when they are investments. Across from mortgage brokers to finding the right, mortgage broker and banker, I think, as well, and just also touching on that idea of how you bring your deposit together is. I think we've learnt so much in this little brief conversation.
I've learned a lot too.
I don't think there's any more to add. So thank you greatly for your time, and we'll look forward to chatting to you guys again soon. You're regulars on this podcast, yourself and Chris, so I'm sure you'll be back.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
What incredible and practical advice from Geoff. All advice is general in nature and does not take into account your personal situation. Please consider if the advice is appropriate for you before acting on it. Thanks for listening to another conversation with SYD Life. Check out more of our resources in the show notes below.